Okay, so like I said, I feel like it would be more appropriate to start with question two, just describing the school district and EL demographics of where you're at. So whoever wants to start, go for it.
I'll go I'll go first. Mine's pretty simple because the demographics basically all the same. So I live in Taipei, so all the students have the same L1 Mandarin. So there's not much diversity, really. They all share the same L1. They all go to the same school. They're basically all like upper middle class families, if that changes anything. Because the school I work at is like an after school language school. So the students come from their regular school and then are in extra language classes. So it's really only families that can afford to send their children to these extra language classes. So I think that makes a little bit of a difference. And the location of the school in the city is more of a wealthy area. So a lot of the students, their parents also speak English. Not all of them, depends, but a lot of them have exposure to English outside of the class. Whereas some of my coworkers who work at a different location, that's not the situation for them. So the only English that those students are getting is literally the two classes a week. But for me, most of the students have some, at least the parents are able to speak a little bit of English. Not that they necessarily help with homework or go over anything we do in class, but they have some exposure to what we're learning in class outside, I guess. So that's my school. Yeah.
Cool. All right, whoever next, Danny.
So I'm in Cooter School District over along the foothills kind of area. So in PSD, there's like weird pockets of demographics here and there, just depending on like the type of housing that's available in the area. Um, and so there's two bilingual schools, um, where most of their population is people of color, and then two newcomer programs at the middle schools and two newcomer programs at the high schools. Um, but then amongst all the other schools, there's still, diverse populations, but those they don't need ELD services or CLD services. Um, in my school specifically, there's only like 5 kids, and one of them is mine, and so it's like a really, really low population, but it's kind of like again, more of a like we're in PSD, we have a lot of weird pockets of, schools going overflowing versus like schools like declining in population. And so I'm in one of those declining schools because most of my neighborhood is like really old families and like nobody's having kids or buying or selling their houses in the area. And so we're just kind of seeing like we're at 75% capacity. And so uh there's not too much diversity in my school. So I hope to move into a position where there is more diversity. But I do like what I'm doing now too. So there's PSD.
And yeah, I live here in Fort Collins, so I see those same trends. So, Rachel, what about you?
Yeah, I can go next. I've got very different trends in my school, it sounds like. I'm in APS, and so our entire building is either in an ELD block or an ALD block, depending on your proficiency or your home language. So our ELD block is for the English language development because we've got a lot of families who speak like Spanish, Burmese, French.
You said
Uh,
Corinne too, right?
sorry?
Corinne too, right?
Yeah, Corinne. Oh my gosh, there's just a lot of them. Posh too is one of the newer ones that are coming through because we have a lot of refugee families. And I feel like it's the close proximity to the hospital too. We have a lot of kids that have higher needs in the building and their families are here for that. And so because of that though, their families are also getting services for like English language. Like a lot of our parents will drop their kids off and be like, okay, I'm going to my English language classes. And so the same that Rebecca was seeing, where it was like the parents have some language modeling and the kids are learning it too. But then like we do have some kids who are ALD, which is like academic language development. And so that's more like English might be your home language, but you're still going to really focus on language in it. So the whole school is getting some type of language block. And I think it's really cool.
Yay. And then Patience, I know you're not teaching yet, but what is your experience?
So District 6, that's where I'm at. So that's here in Greeley. The last time I looked it up, there were 78 different languages spoken in this school district. So it's very diverse. However, I am at Kristen McAuliffe right now, and that's a school that I typically, there are other schools around town that I would sub at, but McAuliffe is where I would typically sub, and my boys go to school there. So I know that it's like primarily English and Spanish speakers, and then there are a few, there's like 3 students I think that speak Chinese, and then otherwise that's the gist of like what we have. And it's only it's probably like 40 students I think altogether that need, like, that go to like CLD classes.
It's 58.
Okay. My 11-year-old in the know.
Awesome.
Thank you, Grayson.
And then I teach at Madison in Greeley as well, and it is a Title I school, so it is in an impoverished neighborhood. And of our 700 kids, 178 of them are language learners, and there are over 60 languages at our school. It's like you just addressed Patience. There's 68, almost 70 languages in Greeley, but yeah, our school has like almost 60. So that is what we are dealing with. But then that plays into question number 1, which is what role do CLD families play in their children's education at your school, considering the context and overlapping spheres of influence model? So, and I said we were having a hard time separating like cultural differences of getting your kid to school on time and getting your kid to school consistently is something we really struggle with. And then unfortunately there's a correlation between those kids that aren't coming all the time and their growth. So what do you guys see?
That's exactly like spot on. That's happening at our school. Yeah.
Because we're pretty close too. We're not very far apart. McAuliffe's like 8 minutes from my school.
At our school, we do see the same thing, but we do see like our parents will, even though they have a hard time getting their kids there, they really are encouraging the education, which also seems strange because like we might be late dropping our kid off, but then they're like, it's so important. We really want them to be here. And so it's like they have a lot of tardies, but their attendance is decent overall. And they have good communication with us. Like I always know what's going on with like my English learner families. So I feel like it's an interesting structure, and our school does always have like, I don't know if your guys' districts have them, the translating apps and stuff like that. Like we have language lines and stuff like that. So I feel like that helps encourage the families to communicate with us. Like talking points will translate stuff.
Do you think that has to do with parents' work schedules? Like that's causing it to like be impeded?
I feel like it's also like a cultural thing, right? That like here in the United States, we, value punctuality and, moving quickly and going through things versus more of like Hispanic cultures are kind of more laid back on like time and don't see it as such like a priority to be like timely and punctual. And so as long as they're going consistently, like that daily, because I know I was late a lot too. And that's like a lot of our Hispanic families, my mom would just take her time. But like really I've seen a lot of like that like difference in culture of, they have, yes, they have it as a value, but right, it's like what is that value? Like what does that look like deeper? Is it punctuality or is it that they're getting something out of this and building English and learning what to that, just sending them forward and hoping that they succeed.
Or too, if you think about it, these parents that are working 1, 2, 3 jobs and the times overlap with getting their kid to school.
Yeah, I agree with Danny. Like it really is different in cultures, the value of like being on time, like how important it is. One semester I spent in Argentina and I remember going to class and the professor would like show up 25 minutes late and we're all just like, do we leave? Do we stay? And it was just like a normal thing. Like when they show up, we start class. And for us in the US, like if a professor showed up 25 minutes late, we'd be like, okay. uh, so yeah, I see how it's different culturally. Um, at my school, it's kind of old school, but also different. So like I said before, the students come from like public school to our school. So they're always there kind of. So it's similar like an extra school, but also like daycare. So it really depends on the families. Some of the parents are very involved and some of the parents are just like, oh, well, you're at daycare essentially, why not just get an extra English class? And then they're kind of just like whatever about it. But some parents are very involved constantly, like communicating, how is my child doing? What can I do to help them? So it really just depends on the family.
Yeah, and
Just
that's
out of
hard school
curiosity.
lines. No, go ahead, Rachel.
Sorry. Does anybody else notice that like if you're having like party days, the attendance is really like and parent engagement is really high? Like, is that the same for anybody else?
They want
Yeah.
their kid to get the candy. They want their kid to get the. But I'm like, I haven't seen you all week. Oh, and you're here on the Friday for the Valentine's party. Or
Yeah, they don't want to take away experiences. And it's often like the kid doesn't earn it. And then you're like, sorry, you don't get this. And they're like, why did you take this away from my child? Why didn't you support your child in completing all these things that you were supposed to do with them?
yeah, we had a friend recently that hasn't been in school for like 3 weeks and then came to the Valentine's party, and we haven't seen her since. Which is really scary, and there's been like reports involved and stuff, but yeah, it's good to have experiences, but she needs to be in school too, you know?
Um, for me, I feel like the role of like the CLT teacher is to like collaborate with the other partners. Like if your school is like a family liaison or like family community partnership, school partnership liaison kind of person that they're working with each other to try to provide them resources. Because a lot of the time, like one thing is that we're like translating things, but then we're also assuming that that family is literate, and not all the time that is true to be true too. And so it's like but also like the research around like, you know, the more education the family has, like they're exposed to more words, and when they're exposed to more words, they read better. And when they read, but you know, that whole um chain, and we're especially at least for a lot of like our families who are moving from other countries, especially the ones from like Guatemala or more Southern Americans, I'm noticing like a trend that they aren't coming back or like coming with formal education as like a trend I noticed when I was a family liaison the last 2 years was that like it really isn't families from Mexico anymore. It's like from Guatemala, Costa Rica, Venezuela, like way more southern. And it really is more rural, and it really depends on each kid. But most of the time, most kids are like rural, like super, super rural education to no education. And so it's like we're throwing them in to try to be, you know, these literate and hoping to use that background knowledge of letter knowledge and letter sounds, but they don't even have that. And so you're pretty much like trying to start from scratch at like 16, 17 years old when they're coming, or at least when I was at the high school, right? But then to, you know, educate families on the importance of being at school, like what these programs are, why they need to keep coming back to school. I mean, Colorado, or at least in my Larimer County area, like truancy laws are terrible and there's nothing that they could do. And so like all you could do is like, oh, that's truancy, and hope to get them back in with just some legal words. I don't, you know. And so, but yeah, I do think attendance is also an issue, especially for like the secondary kids who have, you know, are trying to support their families by working and stuff.
And I just had a question that kind of ties into number 3 about the family engagement strategies. Because I've seen the same thing where we're assuming families are literate, and so we spend all this time and money for translating services to send like notices home to parents, but then they don't know what they say. Do you guys like, what are your district's like strategies for that when you know a good portion of the parents aren't literate?
Well, I can speak to this too, and it kind of ties into question number 3 about like the family engagement strategies. Um, like yeah, if they aren't literate, we had this program called Mother Read, Father Read. Have any of you heard of that before? Well, it's kind of cool. It teaches them how to read along picture books with their kids in their L1, L2, and then L1 and L2 tied together. And because the research shows that even if you're reading an L2, the language proficiency will tie over to the L1 at school. And so it's a really cool after school reading program for parents to learn how to read along English stories to their kids at nighttime. But then, I mean, a lot of the parents were too embarrassed to join or felt that they couldn't do it. And so then we started like kindergarten level texts that I'll teach you this, you go home and take it to your kid too. So it's like CVC words, sight words, very minimal. And so that was a good way to address it. And through our family liaison. And now this year, because of like staffing shortages, we don't have a family liaison. And that program has been subsided. But that was like a way to tackle that problem.
At Cooter again with like the high population, and then we had like a Spanish speaking counselor. He'd work on putting on like FAFSA nights, like pretty much any promo night, like any kind of regular event that we had, he tried to throw the same event like in Spanish, or like close these gaps like the FAFSA night where a lot of our families, or the families that are CLD probably don't have a background or the knowledge or the tech support to try to support their kids and applying for FAFSA. And so like educating about what it is, how to get it, how to apply for it, what it means. And then right now, actually, I'm working with a pilot group at for Poudre High School, and a pilot group that is trying to connect with our CLD families whose kids have IEPs. And so to educate them better about like what is this yearly meeting that you're going to, and what is special education, and what is an IEP, and why does the transition stuff matter? And no, it's not just your kid is lazy and la 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 la. Like this, like what is a disability? And what other options does your student have when they leave here, and that there are services up through 21 that look different for each kid.
Like you said, especially if that parent isn't literate in English or their native language, how helpful. Okay, so we can probably move on to question 4. What ways are you guys applying the SIOP model to your teaching?
Oh, go ahead, Rachel. You go first. I just talked.
It's okay. And mine might even relate to something you're gonna say a little bit. I don't know. But I had just read the post you had put about like engaging background knowledge and wanting to work on that. I feel like that's kind of where I've been working on stuff with my kiddos too. And I've seen a really good impact with that. And it's been really cool because then I have learned so much about what their experiences are, like engaging their background knowledge. So like we're little kids, so if we do a lesson on like animals, like I think we always kind of assume like, so the SLP at my school has a service dog, and so it's very casual for her to just bring a dog into the classroom. Not all kids have that same background experience. And so some of them are like running, screaming into a corner, and we're like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And they go, Afghan, no dog, Afghan, no dog. And we're like, oh my gosh, we're so sorry. But like that also has really opened up some doors for us to ask about stuff and have like food culture days, tell us about like what food you have at home, stuff like that, to like get that background. So really been working on that one too.
That reminded me of that me and the families on did too, called Cooking with Our Families, where we'd invite like a different culture family, and then any gen ed teacher who wanted to join us, and mostly like hopefully like if that the teachers were that students like they were I don't know what I'm trying to say. The student was the teacher, but it was open to anyone in the school to come learn about the culture to come, and then we did like a drink, an entree and a dessert, and it was putting our CLD families in that position of power, in that position of being educators and us being the learners, and like kind of connecting and letting them know that like we value that you're here and what you bring and your diversity. And so I've also had really good meals because of that.
Love that. So jealous.
What do you think, Rebecca, especially being abroad?
Yeah, for me, I feel like I need to work on in general lesson preparation, and then incorporating the vocabulary throughout the lesson. Sometimes I feel like I just go over the vocabulary and then that's it. And there's no like review at the end or like incorporating it throughout the lesson, maybe like talking about one of the words. It's something that I realized too is so most of my classes are like reading based, and the book already has like vocabulary words that I should teach and go over with them. And lately I've been kind of looking at them more in detail, and like half of these words aren't even in the story, or they're not really that important. Like one of the stories I read last week, two of the vocabulary words are like glow and shimmer, and like they're relevant to the story, but in like day-to-day life in future school, like that's not really that important of a word. So kind of focusing on like paying more attention to what they actually need to know versus what like the book might have for me to teach. So more like useful academic vocabulary words that will be helpful in the long run, and not just like situational or for the story. Ones that we can quickly say, oh, this means to shine bright and move on. So more preparation to like better teach vocabulary, and in general just make the lesson better to the content and language objectives.
What do you think, Patience?
I think it's really helped me. Actually, I don't know if I'm answering the question correctly, but
Yeah.
having okay, let me get my thoughts together so I can explain what I was just saying. I
Rephrase it
haven't
too
had
if
a lot
you
of
want.
experience. Was that?
I can rephrase it too if you want.
Oh yeah. So I haven't had like a ton. Oh no, it's okay. I'll get it. But I haven't had a ton of experience writing lessons for the classroom. So I feel like going through this class and seeing the outline and like learning about it has helped me be better at implementing it in my future lessons, so that it's almost like, not that I would have learned any bad habits, but I didn't have any habits formed yet when it came to lesson planning. I just, would kind of like do whatever. So now that like it's in the back of my mind, I feel like it's kind of a different checklist that I just go like boom, 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 and I'm implementing it that way. I find myself, implementing it that way.
Well, you're going to be better for it, because my response in the post was that I felt like I was doing a lot of these things already, and then now I'm kind of going backwards and purposely and like implementing a lot of these aspects from PSYOP. So a lot of it I'm already hitting, but now I feel more conscious about it. So you have an advantage then, Patience, that you're coming from this background and you're going to be better for it. So
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that it's something that I can continue like building upon and actually successfully build upon it.
you will. You definitely will. Well, do you guys have any other like pressing questions or comments or?
I have one comment. I want to
Yeah.
agree with you, Maddie. Like, I feel like in my lessons, I was implementing a lot of the PSYOP areas, but now like learning these specific terms and whatever and areas, I'm kind of going back and like, well, I feel like I did that, but did I do it correctly or too much or too little? And now I'm kind of like rethinking everything that I was doing before, and like, well, does it follow this model? So it's kind of also more stressful lesson planning because I'm trying to incorporate all these parts, but like maybe I was before and just have to change a couple of things instead of like kind of going in reverse. So it's been kind of, I don't know, back and forth.
Same, because there's like putting a name to it, but then there's also like you said, am I doing enough? Am I doing too much? Am I focusing too much on one area? So no, I totally agree with you. And I'm glad you agree with me. Awesome. Well, do you guys have anything else? Sweet. Okay, so I will post and upload this.
Woohoo! One more down.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna stop recording if I know how. There we go.